I love if I can take $1 and turn it into two, and I can use someone else's money to do that. Well, why wouldn't I do that? That's how I've made a living over these last several years. And so my first couple of years, I tried to do everything on my own. I tried to use my own funds. I tried to do all these things. And what you realize is when you're investing in real estate, if you gave me $1 million, I can spend it tomorrow.
Hello, friends. Today on the Real Estate Show from the Travel to Money podcast, we are talking about whether to invest at home or abroad. I'm here with my co-host and real estate expert, Jeremy Resmer. Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
It's going awesome. How about you?
Doing good. So I wouldn't call myself a real estate investor, but I've learned a lot about buying properties overseas and have seen how lucrative it can be. One of the reasons so many people are investing or purchasing homes overseas is due to the high prices in the US. So let's start with the question. Is the US market too expensive for first-time investors?
For me, unequivocally, no. Why I say for me is because there's so many markets you can invest in. So if you want to be in a big city, yeah, you might be priced out. But if you go an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours outside that city, you may find a really cool little town that you can buy a house for, 25, 30, 50,000, 70,000. It just depends, right? So I think to just a black and white answer of is it too expensive or not, I would say no. You can invest in the US. You can invest in, markets close to you. You can invest, several states over. There's different markets that are very different that offer unique opportunities, advantages, pricing, all of that. And so finding those is sort of the key, and finding somewhere where you want to invest in. So
yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned going out from the cities. I've learned in Spain too, where I think it's pretty cheap to buy a home, even in the city. But the further you get from the city, like you go to the small cities that kind of connect pretty easily to the big cities, and your houses are going to be a little bit less expensive. And then you go further out to the small towns and boy, they really start to drop in price even more. Do you think that's just kind of generally speaking the way that real estate works? The closer you are to the city, the more expensive it is, or not so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, yeah, because you have more amenities, more access to jobs, right? So, I'm in the Nashville area, and if I go a couple hours out, actually not even that far. If I go 45 minutes to an hour out, I'm trying to think of where my wife's parents live. I mean, I can buy a house for like $50,000. Now, I can also buy an expensive house, like if I want a nice property and I want to build new or something. Yeah, of course, it'll cost me a lot. But there's a lot of houses that are, 25, 30, 40 years old that I can get really cheap. And my father-in-law actually told me, he's a contractor, right? And he just told me last week, he said, hey, this guy that I'm friends with bought a house for $50,000. He was going to put all this work into it, and he decided, you know what? I'm just going to clean it out. He turned around and he sold it without doing any work to it for $120,000. So there's markets like that, I believe, all over. And I think there's opportunities. It's just a matter of like, what do you know? Like, what area do you know? Do you have contacts there? Do you know what the prices should be? And then it's just making a good buying decision, right? Making an offer that works. They won't all be that easy. You can't just expect to double your money without putting any work in. But yeah, I mean, some of them you're going to hit are going to be singles, and they're going to be, decent investments. And then there's going to be others where it's like, hey, I think this is pretty good. And then once you get into it, you're like, oh shoot, this is a lot better deal than I thought it was. So I think there's a lot of opportunities in the US. And I do think that, generally speaking, the further you go from the cities and the amenities and the jobs and all that, typically prices will go down pretty significantly.
I know for me as someone, I don't own a home in the US currently, and it's something that I've looked at, but the prices just seem overwhelmingly high. But I think having some of the conversations with you has made me realize how much opportunity there is, not necessarily for buying my own home, maybe, but more so if from an investing standpoint, there are just so many different things you can do. I know we talked about in the last episode, real estate investing in land came up, and that is something that just really took my interest a lot because it has such a low barrier to entry and you don't need to know quite as much probably as when you're buying a home. So that sounds really cool and a great way to get involved. Now, have you ever purchased anything internationally? Have you done everything in the US? What does that look like for you?
I have not purchased internationally. So maybe I can interview you here, right? Because you have purchased internationally. So people like you, for example, you say, oh, well, should I invest in the US or should I invest somewhere else? Well, my answer to that might be kind of lame, but it would be the same as if you asked me, should I invest in land or should I invest in houses? Should I own rentals? Should I do single family? Should I do multifamily? I can come back with a lot of different questions, and ask you, well, what do you want to do? And so ultimately it comes down for me is like, what do you know? And what do you want to do? So do you know Spain? Well, okay. Well, you know Spain. You have contacts there. You have some contractors. You have someone that could look over the property. Okay. So if you're 2 worlds away and you have the people and the resources and the network in place, investing in Spain might be fantastic for you. But if you asked me about investing in Spain and I don't know anybody or anything and I've never been there before, I will tell you, well, that's not a good place for me to invest. Unless I wanted to at some point move there or I wanted to be deeply involved in Spain for some reason, then hey, it might be worth something looking into and learning about. But I'm certainly not just going to jump in until I do some due diligence and hopefully visit or hopefully have the right people in place. But so that's what I come back to is invest in the things invest in land, invest domestically, invest internationally. There's so many different things to consider, right? There's political considerations. Yeah. There are legal considerations. There's rule of law. Like does the government actually acknowledge your ownership of the property? So not just like, is it legal to do that, but will they protect you in the court of law if someone comes and vandalizes or steals or does something that is going to, create a mess for you? And so there's all these different considerations. And so I personally have not invested internationally. I've thought about doing a couple of things. I've talked with some other people who live internationally, who I do know who have done that. And they've always told me, you have to know the rules and regulations. You have to know the laws because you can get taken. You can lose so much money. And so those are some considerations that I'd have, but I have not invested internationally.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's been cool about talking to you is I know a lot of people come to me asking how to buy a house in Spain. And for them, some people want to go there to live. And I think that's fantastic. Those are actually my favorite people to do coaching with and stuff, because I understand why they want to be there, quality of life, these different things. And I love the lifestyle over there. But some people contact me and they're like, hey, I want to have an Airbnb empire or something, and I want to buy up all these properties. And that's great. That's fine too. You can do that in a lot of places. But one of the reasons people want to, I feel like, buy homes in Spain, Portugal is because they feel like it's affordable and they feel like they can't afford to live in the US. And maybe as we've talked about big cities, if you need to live in the city, I think that's something my parents and other people I know gave up, was they would move out into the country to be able to afford a home that they wanted to live in, but they'd have a 2-hour commute back and forth, 1 hour each way. Just to be able to have a nice home. And so I think folks that are looking to live internationally are maybe considering something different than that. And then I've been trying to learn more on the investing side, because I didn't buy my house in Spain for the purpose of investments. I was just buying it for myself, and it's turned into a little bit more. And I've sold that now and bought a couple of other ones that we're remodeling. And that's been a really fun project for me. But it wasn't intentional. Like I wasn't going into it with the intention of flipping or doing anything of that sort. So I think it's interesting meeting people who are just like looking at it from an investment standpoint. What I'm learning from you is that there's a lot you can do right in the US. Doesn't mean you don't want to do that there. Maybe it's good to have homes in some different places or real estate investments in different places, because you never know what's going to happen to various economies and you're just kind of putting eggs in different baskets. But to your point, every country you go and invest in They're going to have different laws. Their taxes are going to be different, and that may impact you in some different ways. Yeah, you may have some concerns where that comes around. Do you think, as we're talking about folks who are looking at their primary residence, if you have a residence in the US or you have the opportunity to buy something here, should that be part of your investing strategy, like your own home? Or does it always need to be something outside of that?
So I'm going to give you the lame answer because so it depends who you ask. Okay.
Okay.
So if you ask someone like maybe Dave Ramsey or one of these people that says, hey, you should never have debt and, you don't want to put yourself at risk, then you'll probably hear, no, you should never do that. I actually got started in real estate. So when I switched, that was my source of funds. So, I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but I owned a property in Denver and I ended up selling that property. Well, I couldn't sell it at first because the market was so bad. And so I ended up holding it as a rental because I said, there's no way, like, this is going to be worth something. So I held on to it for about 2 or 3 years and ended up going from, I would have had to bring 14,000 to the closing table had I sold, but by waiting, I ended up getting some tax benefits and some additional income. But really the reason that I did this was because I was hoping that the market would turn around, and it did. And so I ended up getting probably, maybe an extra $60,000 or $65,000.
Wow.
So it was a big jump. And I actually, at the time, my wife and I decided, hey, let's go put that into our, pay down our mortgage. Now, I probably wouldn't do that today because I'm in a very different situation. And I know a lot more than I did back then. But at the time, we put that money into paying down our principal. And so when I started in real estate, my source of funds was pulling out money from my HELOC. And so I was able to take that money. I took a $60,000 HELOC out. And again, like, these are not decisions to make lightly. For me, real estate was going to be it. I was going to figure it out. There was no plan B. And so I wanted to have the capital to go invest. But keep in mind, everyone's risk profile is a little bit different. And I have a wife and kids, and your spouse may not want to do that. That may stress her out to no end. Hey, you're pulling out money from our house to now leverage to buy real estate. Right. If that doesn't work out, or, your business doesn't turn out to be what you think it's going to be, you may lose that. It's very possible. Right. And so it depends on your risk profile and your family dynamics. And I mean, I ultimately moved away from what I was doing, quit my job, and I needed to make this transition. And this is what I chose to do. It was hard, and it probably took me 2 years to make money in real estate. And so I know exactly what I went through. And so when I think about other people, the answer is it depends. If you have the support of your spouse, or, you have the ability to, still make ends meet and you're not putting yourself at risk, I think it's a great way to leverage that money that is not currently being used. Right. Because So again, from my perspective, I've made a living out of buying and selling real estate. And so if I know I can use $50,000 and I can turn that into $100,000 or $200,000, I have time and experience on my side that I know I can do it. And so I'm going to do that every day of the week. However, if you're just starting out, that's a question you have to ask yourself. I would kind of lean to, hey, find a mentor, find someone else who's already doing what you want to do, find maybe a smaller investment, maybe take less risk, prove to yourself that you can do it, you can make money, and then, it's stepping stone, right? Or maybe, if that's the way that you have to get started and you already, you have a job or some sort of other income that's coming in, where if you did lose some of those funds, it's not going to kill you. I would just say, for most people, it doesn't make sense to risk it all. Right. And so that's what I'm in consideration.
I'm going to paint my own picture for you, because this just makes me curious, and this will be fun. So I've obviously bought homes in Spain, and I bought them pretty cheap. And so I can live there for a good chunk of the year, and I love to travel and I like to be on the road. just bought a camper van in the last couple of
Nice.
weeks, going to be doing
Nice.
some van life next year. And so I'm all about like getting creative, not ever having to pay rent, trying to just like, and being able to travel and have fun in the process of trying to build this income. And so I was thinking, like, I have these houses in Spain and I can live there and maybe they're great investments and maybe I flip some more there. I'm not sure. Maybe I do some rentals there. But then I have the ability to get a home loan, like a typical home loan in the US, when I don't really need a loan for myself because I'm not trying to buy a house for myself. Would it be smart to use something like that? I feel like interest rates are super high right now. So I'm not sure if there is any investment strategy for using what I would usually want to use for just my own home in the US temporarily for a few years to start making some moves. Do you see any value in anything like that?
Again, it really depends on where you're trying to go. It's what's your risk profile. It sounds to me like you're someone who wants to experience life and enjoy yourself and also be able to cover those expenses and utilize housing to do some of that while you fund your lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. I think, depending on where you're at in life, what season, if you can do that, then by all means, that can be just a great way to cover your expenses, or that can be a great investment. It really just depends.
Right.
So again, it's hard to answer because there's a million different directions I could take this. But from my standpoint, like I love if I can take $1 and turn it into two, and I can use someone else's money to do that. Well, why wouldn't I do that? That's how I've made a living over these last several years. And so my first couple of years, I tried to do everything on my own. I tried to use my own funds. I tried to do all these things. And what you realize is when you're investing in real estate, if you gave me $1 million, I can spend it tomorrow. If you gave me $10 million, I could spend it tomorrow. You're always going to have capital constraints. It's just the nature of the business. And so it's like, how far do you want to go? And I look at it like this. I want to be able to leverage either my money or somebody else's money. Either one is fine. I prefer other people's money, but if I'm going to leverage my money too, that's okay. So it's so interesting because people always think like, oh, you must have so much money laying around. Actually, no, my money's always invested in some type of asset.
It's working, right?
It's working. It has to be working for you. So one thing you could do, okay? So maybe, again, and this is not financial advice, but I know people who have actually taken loan. They run that loan through a whole life insurance policy. Again, a topic for a whole nother day. An overfunded, properly designed whole life policy. They run it through there, okay? Which means that policy now, you're not buying it for the life insurance benefits. You're buying that policy so that you can then have that money growing uninterrupted. So maybe you got $50,000, you run it in through a properly funded whole life policy. Now I can borrow from that policy, let's say 95% of that 50, and I go invest in real estate. All the while, my 50,000 that I put through that policy is still growing uninterrupted in perpetuity. So now I've got money moving in two different places, right? So that's one option. And that's not for everybody. I wouldn't say, hey, go do that. But what I am saying is that's one option. Another would be, hey, if you just want to pull out a HELOC, or if you're able to get a loan from someone and you just have a can't lose deal. I mean, at some point, I'm a big believer at some point you have to take calculated risks. And so if I'm going to invest, I'm going to invest in myself. And my thing is this, I'm not going to quit. So maybe I'm not going to make $100,000 off of this deal, but maybe I make 5,000, and maybe 5,000 is enough of an incentive and a confidence builder to say, holy cow, I've screwed everything up. I got this house wrong. I should have bought it, $10,000 less. I over rehabbed the house. I did everything wrong. And yet I still made money. Or maybe you lose 5,000. You're like, holy crap, it stresses you out, but you're like, shoot, I screwed everything up and I only lost $5,000. But to be honest with you, the key is to make an informed decision and to know yourself, to know your risk profile, and to hopefully buy your first property right. Know what you're doing. Talk to the right people. Make sure that you really do have a deal, because the houses and land and properties that I invest in today versus when I started are deals that I pretty much can't lose. Unless I completely screw something up, I want to invest in deals that I can't lose on, so that when something does go wrong, maybe my $50,000 profit is only 40. Right. But when you start investing and taking risks where you're like, oh, I'll make $20,000. And then all of a sudden you get into a house and there's a foundation issue and you're like, oh shoot, there's my $20,000. And now you're hopeful to get, you're lucky if you get $1,000. Or if you make any money at all. So I think that's a big thing, is like, listen, if you know what you're doing and you know yourself, to thine own self be true. I'm a big believer that when the time is right, you have to take that jump. And I'm a believer that if, pulling from your HELOC is the only source of funds, then maybe you do that. Getting a loan from someone close to you, I'm okay with doing that. Getting a loan from a hard money lender and you put yourself on the line and you personally guarantee those funds. I mean, that's how I've gotten started. That's how I do a lot today. And I'm constantly borrowing money. I'm using my own money. I'm using money from my policies. I'm borrowing money from friends and family. I've got other investors. I've got regular banks. I've got hard money lenders. And the key is finding the right deals that other people and banks want to invest in. So,
right.
I don't know if that's an answer, but I do believe that I think for a lot of people, the leverage that real estate offers is tremendous. You can borrow other people's funds to generate a lot of income. And so if you're smart and you reinvest or you pay those loans back, I mean, I think I've probably borrowed $20 million in like 7 years.
Wow.
And we've paid that back. And it scares me almost to think about it. I'm like, holy cow. But it just happens and you go on to the next one. And the goal is like, hey, buy the right deal, make sure they, everyone gets paid back, act with integrity. And when you do, more people now want to invest with you. Now you build up a track record. Now you can start highlighting, hey, we thought we were going to make 20% on this deal, but oh yeah, we made 35% for our investors. That's a killer deal. So now all of a sudden you go from having one or two people that you're like begging to invest with you. And now they see what you did and what's going on. Now you've got 10 or 15 people actually begging you to invest. So it's a process, but once you get good at it, then all of a sudden you see the potential of using your own funds or other people's funds. And so if that's what it takes to get started and you feel comfortable with it, by all means, that's something that should definitely be considered.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And sometimes it's like you said, you kind of start somewhere. You start with what you know, and then you kind of grow from there. I know for myself in Spain, I bought one house and I learned the process of it through buying that. And that has opened up more opportunities. I was able to buy a couple more homes. Now I really pretty well understand the process of buying homes in Spain. And I just keep learning. And the more I learn about that and the more I do it, the more proficient I become in the process. I can help other people. And then I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, I want to invest with you. And I'm like, I'm not trying to do that just yet. I'm not there yet. Yeah. But those opportunities are there. And so you really do just learn as you go. And then before you know it, you look back and you're like, wow, I've really kind of become an expert in this specific thing that I'm doing. You get better and better at it. And I think the answer ultimately, obviously, to what we're talking about today is that there isn't a clear answer to investing at home or investing abroad, because it really depends on what you're looking to do. And maybe the answer is both. Maybe the answer is at home for you, and maybe the answer is abroad for you. And there's just so much opportunity and so many ways to be creative. Well,
let me tell you a cool story real quick.
Yeah. Dude.
So, a buddy of mine, when I was living out in California years and years ago, so I saw something on the internet about investing in Nicaragua, and I'd never been there, but I thought, man, Costa Rica, like Nicaragua was like what Costa Rica was years and years ago, and so. Costa Rica just blew up and it got really expensive. And so I was looking at Nicaragua and I was, actually talking to my buddy about it. He goes, dude, Nicaragua, are you kidding? I'm like, no, is that bad? He goes, my buddy bought this house by the beach. Okay. And I'm like, yeah. So tell me about the property. He's like, dude, and these are his words, because he's a surfer guy. He's like, my buddy bought this property and he wanted somewhere where he can go and catch really great waves, that there weren't a million people, but it was still safe. All the things. So he wanted to be able to go down there and surf and have a place by the beach. So he bought this property. And as it turned out, he loved it so much. He created a whole business model. He ended up attracting other surfers. And what he started to do was, he's like, well, wait a second. Surfers are going to need all their arrangements taken care of, right? They're going to need not just the house, but they're going to need to get transportation. They're going to want to have all their accommodations, food, all that stuff taken care of. And so then he's like, well, wait a second. Why don't we create this really cool experience where like groups of surfers will come down and we'll hire a photographer and a videographer who will then film them when they're on the waves for that whole week. And then at the end of the week, they'll provide like a DVD or, whatever. I don't even know if they do that anymore, but a link where they can get access to all of their, all of their videos, all their images. And so literally he's created this whole surf tourism thing, but it was all out of the desire to have a vacation property on the beach. And so, fast forward, the guy ended up moving down there, ended up getting involved in real estate as an agent. But then he's like, well, shoot, I can do all these different things. And so he created a whole lifestyle around surfing and just serving that one population. And it's just taken off. And Nicaragua is a really great surf destination. And so, he was early to the scene and has just really created an awesome, essentially like surf tourism business out of it. And so many other sub businesses have sprouted from that, because he's like, well, there's a need for this and need for that. So it's like, real estate's just one thing, right? So if you want that, you can do that internationally. You can go and create whatever lifestyle you want. So hearing you talk about, your travels and buying a house in Spain, like to me, I'm like, dude, that's nuts. I can buy a house over here and make really good money, and I can go deep and have boots on the ground and do all the things. But at the same time, it's like, well, it's so cool because there's an adventure attached to that. It fits your lifestyle, it fits your personality. So, I mean, to each his own. That's the part that's so cool, is real estate can play a part of it, whether it's in another country, it's here in the US. There's opportunities for everyone. It's just find what you like, find what you know, or learn what you need to know, and then, go take your risk, invest in yourself, and then, the rest is history.
Absolutely. I feel like all of the money that I have made in the biggest forms for the least amount of time put into it has come from real estate. And I'm not even a real estate investor, like at least not intentionally. I hope to become one, and someone who works on that a bit more, but there's just so much opportunity, whether you're doing rentals, whether you're flipping, there's so many opportunities. So anyhow, I can imagine that some of you, like me, have learned a little something new today. So be sure to subscribe and watch our real estate episodes every week. Next week, we'll be discussing using life insurance as real estate investing. And we talked a little bit about that today. So let me tell you, you don't want to miss hearing more about that. Be sure to leave a comment, say hello, and let us know if there are any specific questions or topics you would like for us to discuss. I really appreciate each of you choosing to spend your time here. I can't wait to see where your dreams will take you.